Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. Very exciting topic. And I think this is the thing. Everyone may think this is a boring topic, not as important, but with the silver tsunami coming, this topic is probably more important than ever, is to help you position and help your clients set up the wealth that they took to build for so long to transfer it to the next generation or to the different trade groups, organizations, wherever they would love to give their money as a trust. And it is so important because this is what people forget. They're there to just maybe do transactions and not be an advisor to their clients, but they're forgetting. A lot of times you built a relationship with their parents and grandparents. When they transfer to the kids don't know you. But if you help them put the trust, help them organize, you are now a trusted advisor for the family. And with that, and knowing how to take a look at what they have, working very closely with an attorney or a trust advisor or an advisor, right? You need to be working with all of their advisors. And that's the thing in commercial real estate. This is how you become very important and very close to their entire family. And I'll just tell you, I've been helping from sometimes their family to their grandkids. And I'm fortunate at this point, some people's grandkids, or something a lot longer, because I got to start so early with one of my clients that was near almost 100 years old. And because of them, I built a relationship with their entire family, probably 4 generations. And it was important that I wasn't just a transactional broker. I was a trusted advisor doing the right thing to help their family preserve and keep the wealth that their great grandparents built. And it was substantial, buying back in the close to the 1900s, right? They built something very substantial to help them guide them through. But what I also needed is looking and finding experts, meeting as many people like Scot Conway. Scott, it was great to meet you and to really hear about your story. And not only are you a grandmaster, took a lot of this, but you also are a lawyer. I don't know how that happened. And there's so many things through your journey, writing books. But Scott, if you don't mind kind of sharing all your background and the importance of getting this advice early and not waiting to the last minute, because there's some bad things that usually does happen if you wait too long. But Scott, please share your background, your story, and give us a little advice how we can help our clients.
Well, I will get into some of the profundity of the things that we can be doing for our clients, but a little bit about my background is I became a lawyer in 1992. I've been doing martial arts since 1971, so that's the Grandmaster Scott part that people know. And as part of that, it's a whole person, whole life art with what we call generational continuity, which means many of these martial arts have been passed down sometimes hundreds of years, and we have histories and lineages going back centuries. And so I'm accustomed to thinking in terms of generations. And when I became a lawyer in 1992, one of my very first matters I worked on was an estate matter, and it was a mess because of real estate. And over the years, I've noticed the biggest problem estates have are real estate problems. And because we keep having real estate problems, eventually I became a real estate broker. And every time I was involved in the transaction, because of my estate background, I always made sure I'm having conversations surrounding the estate. Very commonly, someone is selling a piece of property that was in their trust, and they transfer it out of their trust for ease of the sale. That way, you don't have the extra complexity of, well, who's the appropriate trustee, who is authorized to sign the documents, and all of that stuff. And then they buy their new place, it's in their own name, and they forgot to put it back in the trust. And if it goes in a different direction in their will versus their trust, that can create a problem. And so these are the kind of messes that we periodically run into. So I've been a real estate broker for, what am I at now? 20 years. I've been a lawyer for 33, I think I'm up to now. And I've been a martial artist for 54 years this year. So lots of things. And I write a lot of books. And I'm going to be telling you about one of those because it is pertinent to exactly what we're talking about. Let me share my screen here. Now, in particular, though, I do have a bonus gift slash ask, I suppose, is I have lowered the price of the books I'm going to be talking about in Kindle to the lowest Amazon will allow me to do. So Unforgettable Agent is $1.99. And it's component books if you want to buy them separately, or I think 99 cents. And if you could give me a review on Amazon, I would appreciate that because that will help us get the word out. Because as I talk about this, you will see how often we in real estate are at the center of the mess. And when you're at the center of the mess, that means you can also be the solution. So the book I'm going to talk to you about in the principles is Unforgettable Agent. Now, the Unforgettable Agent book is dealing with this problem of real estate and estates. And our clients have estates. Now, if they have a trust, they have a trustee. If they have a will, they have an executor. They have estate lawyers. And real estate is usually the biggest asset changes clients will make in their estates. When they buy and sell their house, when they invest in their first rental property, when they start to buy strip malls and they're getting into more and more investment property. We are helping them make the biggest changes that occur in their estate. And most clients don't think to talk to their estate lawyer with every transaction. Being one of those estate lawyers and having someone come for an update after 10 years, and they don't own anything that was in their original documents, and they have multiplied their holdings since then, and none of it is accounted for. And so they don't call the estate lawyer. They're talking to us already because we're helping them with the transaction. And so that lets us help them make smart real estate moves that could be bad estate moves if they don't think about it, and we can turn it into being smart on all sides. We can be the fix. We can also, in the process of fixing this problem with them, network with their family, as James said, down the generations. When my grandmother died, she had 129 lineal descendants. And so, between her children, her grandchildren, and a handful of great grandchildren, if someone were well networked and positioned with grandma as the trusted professional when grandma died, that could be dozens and dozens of households that would also trust that person because if they took good care of grandma, they'll probably take good care of mom and dad and aunt and uncle and probably take good care of us and all our cousins. So we can be the fix. We can network with the family. We can network with the trustee, not just of our individual clients' trust, but of the future trustees and the successor trustees if we know how to do this well and we take good care of the families. And executors and the trustees, if, just in case people don't know, are the people who run the trust, and the executors are the people who take care of the wills. And then, of course, they have lawyers. There are estate lawyers, most obviously, other attorneys that may be helping them with the particular real estate, their financial planners, and more. And if we are trusted by all these people when something needs to happen, and we'll be talking about this as we go, who are they going to call first? So the book I'm talking about is Unforgettable Agent, The Estate Advantage Business Now and Ongoing Referrals. Be the one they remember, be the one they trust, be the one they call first. Now, the Unforgettable Agent book actually has three parts in it. If you have the physical book, you open to the beginning, it'll give you the guide for each of the three sections, and each one has its own table of contents because it's literally three books in one. And so Unforgettable Agent talks about the real estate side. I love them enough about the family estate side and overlooked obvious for the business or the income property estate issues. Now, you could just get the pre-planning playbook that just has I love them enough and overlooked obvious. And so these options exist, and I'm going to get into how to get those at the end, but they're all available on Amazon. So I attend the marketers cruise every year, and we do these mastermind dinners. And so I've got a bunch of these 6 and 7 figure business owners, and I was talking to them about this estate issue and talking to them about the fact that real estate agents are the professional best situated to be the solution, even more than the estate attorneys, because we are the ones having the conversation, having the interaction during the big asset changes. I had a neighbor that was dealing with a mess. I had just finished the book, and then a neighbor husband appeared at my door. His wife was in tears. he asked me if I could come over and help. And we have a neighborly thing. We call it the Son Exchange Program because uh, it's one of my mother's friends, and so the estate lawyer goes to help there, and then they have a son who does technology, and so the technology son will come help out my mom or help me out sometimes. And so I went over there as part of the Son Exchange Program, and I found his wife in tears. There was a mess of estate documents on the kitchen table. She's got these deeds. She's got a will. She's got a trust. She's got a well-written legalese trust. If you're a lawyer and you read the trust, you see like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. If you're a regular civilian reading this document, it may as well be Greek. The legal actions to take were simple, but setting her emotional state took the most time. I spent about an hour with her. 40 minutes of it was glancing through the documents and getting emotionally settled so that we could talk about the fairly simple, straightforward things that she needed to do. Now, I'd rather we didn't do this to our trustees. I would rather we didn't have our executors sitting at their kitchen table in tears because they don't know what any of this stuff means and they don't know how to make the stuff happen. I'd rather we didn't do this to our families. One of the things I forgot to mention before is I'm also a pastor. And as a pastor, I've done funerals. I've sat with families after the sudden loss of a loved one, and I've seen their pain and their rage. And to think that they'll have to go through this and a funeral and a memorial and then deal with all the legal stuff with an estate document and this emotional state. That's just crazy. These things need to be simple and straightforward. And so when we are part of our clients leaving a mess behind because we didn't help them solve this problem, when we could have, we are a participant in it. Now, we're not responsible for it because that's not what we're being paid to do. But if we are the solution to it, we can make more money. So as I was talking to, and this is a different group, and we were discussing the problem, and a lot of them have different opinions. A lot of them realize that they own businesses and they have zero plan for what happens if they're taken out of the equation, even for a little while. Because while we were there, one of our business owner colleagues got in an accident on St. Martin and was stuck on the island for 2 weeks. And we pondered that in her case, her husband could do everything that she needed done in the business back on the mainland of the United States. But that wasn't true of all of us. Some of us realized if we were down for 2 weeks, our business is down for 2 weeks. And we didn't have a plan in place. And that's part of all of this. If you plan it well, all these things are solved. So Mary was the first estate that I worked on. That's the one I was doing when I was a brand new lawyer in 1992. Mary had bought a strip mall and she managed it herself. She was experienced in business and real estate. She knew how to take care of it herself, but she planned to leave it to her two adult children. She gave it to her second husband because of a mistake. But here's part of the thing. If the kids had gotten it, they needed a property manager and or a commercial real estate agent if they wanted to sell it. So while we're talking about Mary at this particular table, among the many things we said is that if her real estate professional had been involved in the conversations about what she was doing, she was making a smart financial move. She had moved it from the trust into her own name as part of refinance and restructuring some of her assets. But the professional that was helping her do all of this wasn't thinking about the impact on her estate, was just assuming everything would be fine. Well, things got slowed down, a couple of glitches, and then she never put it back in the trust. In the trust, it took care of her kids. Not in the trust, her second husband got it. And her second husband had no interest in losing $250,000 in equity to these kids that he didn't help raise. They weren't his kids. And he walked off with $350,000 that wasn't meant for him. But even if the kids had kept it, they didn't know what to do. Mom had always managed this herself. They didn't know what the obligations of the landlord were. They didn't know what it would take to manage the property. They didn't know how to find a property manager. If they decided they just wanted to sell it, they didn't know who to talk to about selling it. And as it worked out, their estate attorney did not have an existing relationship with the real estate professional that was responsible for the initial transaction. So when they go to the lawyer doesn't have any referrals. All the lawyer can do is ask around and see who someone might recommend. But in all of those cases, imagine if you were part of that transaction and you're following up with Mary to make sure everything gets settled the way it's supposed to be settled. And that when you find out in your conversations with Mary that she intends to leave this to her kids, that you can have the conversations with her about, oh, well, should we wrap the kids into this conversation so that they understand more about what this property is, how it works, what the obligations of a landlord are, and that if they might need a property management company, that we already have someone that we've vetted and that they're ready to have it managed so they don't have to like fire sell it at a discounted price because they don't know what they're doing. If you're that professional, guess who gets called? And then if anyone is asking for a referral and their estate attorney has heard from you and only from you in the process of arranging this entire transaction, and that you followed up and you've made sure that the estate attorney has whatever documents they need, when that estate attorney gets the call, they're going to say, oh, yeah, Scot Conway, he was the one who helped take care of one of my clients. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting even more referrals. Now, Mark and Ken was a much more dramatic situation because Mark owned hotels and he left his hotels to his son, Ken. Now, Ken had been at the level of knowledge and understanding where he would periodically read things in magazines, he'd see things online, he'd have these conversations with dad about the business in general. And it's really easy to have hypothetical discussions when you're not actually responsible for anything. And so when Mark left his hotels to Ken, he thought Ken would just run the hotels. Well, Ken had all these great ideas when he's sitting down chatting with dad, but when you're sitting behind the big desk and you're responsible for everything, and you find out you know almost nothing about this business, Ken did not know how to run them. And he suddenly realized he was in way over his head and he had to quick sell them to competitors at a steep discount before they all went out of business. What Mark and Ken needed was a business broker and a hospitality business consultant and a commercial agent ready. And had Mark been having conversations with his real estate professional, which say that's one of us, and we're having a conversation with him about what his plan is for when this is no longer going to be his. And oh yeah, I'm going to give that to my son Ken. And we're having the conversations with him about, well, how much does Ken know about running the business? Is Ken going to need some help? Is Ken going to need a consultant? Does Ken need to learn anything? Is Ken going to need to have a commercial agent at the ready to help him if he decides he needs to liquidate a consolidator, he wants to sell one and buy another? And then you develop the relationship with Ken. Then when Ken's in over his head, instead of him scrambling to quick sell to anybody who will make him an offer, he calls you. And you have the professionals ready to go because you have a relationship with Ken. And if he does sell, that you can first off be part of putting together the team to keep it going so it can sell at its full fair market value. And then that commission is yours because you were involved. He needed a business broker, he needed a commercial agent. And just as importantly, he needed the professionals that he could trust. Ideally, he has a relationship with already that could help him preserve the value of the asset so that he's not in a rush to sell it to anyone who will make him an offer. So while we were talking about this at the table and considering all of these things and realizing how many of us are in this mess, how many of us have bought and sold real estate, how many of us own businesses, and it never occurred to us. Well, as the real estate professionals, we can be the ones that make sure it does occur to our clients. And then we become known to the next seller of that property. So you'll hear James refer to the silver tsunami. If you don't know what the silver tsunami is, it's the fact that the youngest of the boomers is 60 now. The oldest of Gen X is turning 60. And between the boomers and Gen X, our generations own 80% of all of the assets. They will be changing hands. And if we build this kind of relationship, when it changes hands, we already have a relationship with the next seller. We already have a relationship with the professionals that advise the next seller. I mean, we already know to maintain the relationship with our buying clients because they can be a client again later, especially if they buy their first rental. Well, if they do well, they may be buying a second rental and a third rental. And if we can be the professional that maintains that relationship, we know we're going to get that business. Well, with the silver tsunami, with the sheer number of boomers that are of retirement age, some of which are looking to simplify their estates, some of which may be thinking whether or not maybe they should sell some of their more complex holdings so that their whole estate can be simplified and we can help them make that decision. Or they just want to hold it and then it's going to be the trustees and executors liquidating property. We need to have that relationship so that we are the trusted advisor already familiar with the property. Because with estates, the next level client could be a spouse. That's usually pretty straightforward. If we have a relationship with the buyers and sellers, we probably have a relationship with both spouses. But it could be the trustee, could be a beneficiary. And here's part of the reason this is so important. Very often it might be someone out of state, someone that may have no experience with real estate at all, and definitely doesn't have experience with real estate in the state. In California, I think the property taxes are running about 1.1% or thereabouts. In Texas, it's over 2%. And if someone inherits, grandma and grandpa's house and property and it's worth $1 million and they're thinking, oh, okay, well, I guess there's property taxes due and they're thinking it'll be like 10 grand. And they find out it's $22,000 and go, well, I don't have $22,000. Well, if we're the real estate professional, we can let them know what's coming before it shows up, but only if we have the relationship with them. Because if this, California Gen Xers are taking care of the boomer mom and dad stuff in Texas, that's a different deal than in California. If they know who we are, if we're the ones that they know, then we're the ones who get the business. So there's money in it to be the solution to this problem. And all of these people at the table agreed and understood, yes, this is a big problem. 5 out of 6 business owners and income property owners will have their business disappear when they die. That either their families will have to liquidate quickly because they don't know what to do, they don't know how to run it, they don't know how to take care of it. If there's problems that show up right away, they don't know what's their responsibility, and they'll have to be scrambling. And we can help them not have to scramble. And we can be the one that gets the listing. We can be the one that gets the sale. We can be the one that helps simplify the estate. For all real estate, being known to the professional is always useful. If we work with the estate attorney, if the estate attorney has never, ever, ever had a real estate professional show up and make sure that the estate attorney had whatever they needed, say if they need a copy of the deed. And we're the only ones that have ever showed up to provide a copy of the deed and maybe met for lunch and had lunch and chatted with them about how we see the problem and understand how they see the problem. We become the only one who's ever done that with them. And then we will often, therefore, be the only real estate professional they know that pays attention to estate needs. And so when their clients and their successor clients, because often whoever took care of the trust and the will ends up dealing with the trustee and the executor later on, when they're asked for a referral, that's us. So I talk about all of this in the book Unforgettable Agent. If you want to get more about that, that's unforgettable-agent.com. And if you'd rather just jump in on a QR code, a QR code is coming up here. And so if you scan that with your phone, that'll just take you to the page unforgettable-agent.com. And you've got some options there. I mean, you don't have to buy the book. The book's available on Amazon. I think it's $20. If you get the Kindle, it's $1.99 right now. Like I said, all these component books down to the lowest Amazon will allow me to do because I want to get this out there. And then if you can give me reviews, that is the best way for Amazon to go, oh, people are buying it and people are talking about it. And then they start to push it out because you can see it 5 out of 6. business owning families are running into this kind of disaster, and we can be the fix and we can earn more business being the fix. That we can ride the silver tsunami business wise for our side. So even just being mercenary, this is an important thing to help fix for our clients. But because, in my opinion, we care about our clients. They're not just transactions to us. Now, all the people at the table all believe that, well, no, real estate agents, they're only in it for the commission. That hasn't been my experience. My experience is that we really care about our clients beyond just the money we make off of them. And so, whether we care or whether all we want is the money, either way, this is something to solve. Now, it is attached to a much more expensive program, but the unforgettable-agent.com is plenty for most people to take a massive step forward in being part of the solution to this problem. Now, you don't even have to buy the book. That I even have a free report that gives a basic 3-step introduction of here's 3 things you can start doing like today if you have a client meeting this afternoon. That it's such a short, quick read with such quick little things that you can do immediately. You could literally go get that free download, read it in 5 or 10 minutes, and apply it this afternoon. And then the entire book and the deeper program helps all of us be ready to help our clients at a much, much deeper level. But the big point is we have clients who have these kind of problems. We have now here's one last thing before I drop the slides is that some people think, well, I'm mostly doing it for people in their late 20s and 30s. And let's say that's true. But you're talking to them about their estates because they may not have one yet because it never occurred to them. But now they're buying their first rental property and suddenly it's at a different level. And their kids are young, so they have to think about this differently. Well, when they talk with their parents or their grandparents, and you're the only one who's mentioned estate, and the parents or grandparents go, oh, I never thought about that. Maybe I should talk to them too. So even if your clientele isn't a boomer, isn't a Gen Xer, you're talking to the older millennials or even the younger millennials, all of this makes a difference for them. And it makes a difference for them in a way that builds our relationship. One last addition is that it also gives us a great excuse to talk to clients that maybe we haven't talked to for a while. It gives us a great opportunity to have conversations with clients that maybe we've sent them a card, that we have our send out cards account, and we drop them a card or a note every once in a while, but we haven't really had a conversation. This could be a great conversation starter for someone we haven't talked to in a while. And if in the process of the conversation they decide, you know what, I hadn't really thought a lot about that. Maybe I should simplify my estate. And they decide to start to liquidate some of their more complex real estate holdings, maybe that are out of state from their kids or their grandkids. Guess who they're going to probably give that listing to? Guess whose help they're going to seek? And guess who makes money doing exactly that? That's us. And so that's what I have to share about that as we come to the bottom of the hour. If anyone has any questions, or more specifically, for whatever questions you have, let me know and I will be happy to dive into them. Otherwise, James, if you have any comments, and I know that you're really big on understanding the silver tsunami we are in.
No, so Scott, how can you get started? Because, some people may not or feel comfortable to bring this up, but obviously many of us, when you become trusted, they do trust you because you do the right thing and they do ask weird things. Do you have a carpet cleaner? Do you have a lawyer? Do you have a CPA? They do ask these things.
Mm.
So how could you engage in a way, with the clients? And I always say you grow with your clients to bring up this topic and maybe, to save money, right? By putting them in trust and organizing this. And I know for like I said, one of the $1 billion clients that owned most of LA. I mean, crazy how long he bought things in Los Feliz. But the other client that I had has been buying when he told me he was a sharecropper in Mississippi. All of a sudden he had 30,000 units, right? That was crazy to organize, and it was a top-notch team. So how do you get started to look at everything, right? And be part of that conversation? What would you do?
Well, it begins just with talking to the client. Now, sometimes people wonder, well, how do I have like that very, very, very first step? The very, very, very first step is I always tell people start off if you just learned this. I was just in a seminar with a lawyer was teaching us something, and it occurred to me that I hadn't checked in with you on this to make sure that everything was set up well. And that will usually get most clients' attention because you've helped them before. And you said that I was just learning something new. So it's like I didn't overlook it. I didn't just not do it. But there's this new thing. And I realized that I hadn't talked to you about it. And so I thought I would follow up with you so that I can check in to see if all of this is set up well and if there's anything I can do to help. For the beginner, I would get the downloadable report and just the among the questions is one of the things the lawyer was talking about is to find out whether your clients are putting it in the trust or holding it in their own name, to find out if it's part of their estate plan, to find out if what the trustee knows or the executor knows or who's going to inherit things and what they understand about the property. And all these things that the lawyer was talking about, usually an estate lawyer would handle, but a real estate professional as the person who helped you make the transaction, I'm uniquely situated to understand that we just did a big thing. Or even if it was several years ago, that, a few years ago we did a big thing. We bought you a 12-plex. And I didn't know that it might be a good idea for me to follow up with you about how that's going with the estate plan rather than just assume you've talked to your estate lawyer about it. And so it's a great way to start the conversation. Now, the bigger and more complex everything is, then the more you would just ask, like, well, who do you have managing it? Do you have your estate lawyer, financial planner involved in this? Would it be helpful to you if I had a conversation with them and that we could take a look at your entire asset portfolio and give you some advice on it? And just begin there. Most of our clients aren't going to have massive complex holdings without having other professionals involved. It just may not always occur to them to talk to those other professionals every step of the way.
Scott, and that's something interesting where when you are trusted, you do look at everything. You're like, why do you own something way over there? And they're like, oh, I forgot about that. Right. And I'm saying, a lot of times it's really helping them organize, doing an evaluation on everything you could, taking a look at it, repositioning assets to consolidate it, having the conversation with the kids or the grandkids, or definitely their advisors. You need to be right, a very symbiotic, very cooperative, not like you're trying to steal it or steer it or move it, right? Like you were saying, if you have some advisors, love to be involved with it and get it early, because in business brokerage and other type of real estate assets that are more complex, it can't be last minute because it does take time to sell. Especially I had people that had a bunch of land, right? Raw land. They were land banking. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is, you know, tougher because it was literally in the middle of nowhere. And it is important to look at everything and have those conversations because you will see all of their assets, especially if they trust you. And if you have to build stronger trust if they won't show you all of that. Because the ones that trusted me let me see everything and I just kept it to myself. So any questions from anyone else? Because I will tell you, this is probably one of the biggest main things that you could do for your clients to set it up to protect what they have. Even if you're young, you just never know. And then transferring it along, because once you're part of it, you see it all. The kids, the grandkids trust you, the advisors trust you, and you build this massive network. And I'll tell you, all of their networks of experts, if they trust you too, you're passing your own referrals back and forth to the CPAs, to the lawyers, to the advisors, to the insurance agents, right? There's this whole ecosystem that you're involved in. Or if they don't have the right people, you bring them in, right? But you let them feel everyone part of the group, non-threatening, right? You got to just play a little politics. So any questions from anyone? April, you always have a question. I got to always call on you that I see you.
I
You're muted.
didn't
Oh, there
have
you
a
go.
question. I know I didn't have a question, but I do understand the importance of what Scott is sharing. oftentimes people feel that the attorney knows everything. And sometimes deals and assets are mishandled because the attorney steps outside of their realm of authority there, and it just kind of gets a bit cumbersome. So I do see, based on what Scott shared, the need for us as advisors and real estate practitioners to step in and get a seat at the table. So but thank you, Scott, for sharing the information. And thank you, James, for putting me on the spot.
Always. And Scott, if you don't mind sharing your contact info too, I know you've done slides and others in the book, but I would just say this is really important for those that haven't gone through it, is to build this trust, build this network. It will happen. And unfortunately, it's better to be prepared before you're doing this fire drill and everyone's just worried. But it is important to understand where everything is so you can be part of it, bring in the right people. LJ, I see your camera's on, so I'm gonna call on you, LJ. That's what you get. So
you know, and I'm just like leaving the gym, so I'm working out, and I said I have to jump on this call, but very, very right. I've had to work with real estate attorneys, and going to what April said and what Scott is saying, basically sometimes you get with an attorney who kind of goes beyond, and then the understanding gets misconstrued between the agent, the client, and now everybody's trying to figure it out. So us understanding what Scott is bringing, absolute 100% needed, being that we've, like April, myself, I believe Scott, James, all of us on this call may have experience being that liaison without understanding, well, we know what our client needs, but what's happening with what's happening with what the legal is saying. So I love it. I love it. And I know I'm definitely going to use it for commercial. Absolutely.
Yep.
thank
Oh,
you.
by the
So
way,
so so Scott, how's this with attorneys? Because we all know attorneys know it all, right? And you don't fight with them because that's a bad way. How do you work with attorneys, let's say as agents, residential or especially commercial agents, to not fight but collaborate and cooperate?
well, the big thing is when you come to the lawyer is you ask the lawyer what they need because lawyers prefer to be asked rather than told by quote unquote not their client. Because when the person paying the bill shows up and says, "I want you to do this, and I'm paying you $500 an hour, whatever the hourly rate is," the lawyer go, "Okay, well, you're giving me money. You have a right to tell me." But when an outside professional shows up and they're trying to tell the lawyer what to do, instead of asking the lawyer what they need to do their job, and then providing it, and then you can ask the lawyer, "Would it be helpful if?" And then you give what you think your advice would be as a real estate professional. But here is a related story to real estate that happened in one of the estates that I consulted on. It was too late to do anything about it, so this was just a consulting gig. But um, Grandpa said he bought some property. Going through Grandpa's paperwork, we couldn't find any copies of any deeds, but Grandpa kept saying he had this property. Well, you do a county search in the county Grandpa lived in, no sign of any real estate transactions, no sign of any real estate transactions with the county recorders in the adjacent counties. We couldn't find anything. Now, here's part of the question. Did Grandpa own land? We don't know. If he did, we couldn't find it. Was it in the name of some LLC or some other entity that we didn't have paperwork for? We don't know. Maybe it didn't exist and it was just something Grandpa was just talking about. Ultimately, whatever it was, wherever it was, we have no idea. And so imagine doing that in Texas and you've got hundreds of counties, and say he bought the property in Oklahoma, but nobody knows. Well, whoever the real estate professional is doing the transaction, say, does a copy of this deed need to go to an estate attorney? Does a copy of this deed need to go to a trustee, an executor? So that somebody knows. Because in that case, if Grandpa ever got a copy of the deed, he didn't put it with his papers. I mean, we couldn't find anything. Maybe it existed, maybe it didn't, maybe it was worth $1 million, maybe it was underwater. The real estate professional could have been the solution to that problem. And so we get stuff like that. If you're helping people make changes, if I draw up someone's will and trust today and it accommodates every single thing going on, and then tomorrow you help them buy a strip mall, that strip mall is not in yesterday's documents. And if they don't have any paperwork indicating anything about the strip mall, which is more and more common these days, it used to be you go through grandpa's mail, you're going to find stuff in the mail. Nowadays, you need grandpa's email. You need his logins. And if you don't have all of that, you have no way to find things. And you're doing best guess. And the old conventional hunt when you can't get into anything is really hard. But the real estate professionals are the solution. We help make the mess without it being our responsibility, but we're doing the transaction so we can have those conversations. And now all of a sudden you have a relationship with grandpa, you have a relationship with the kids, you have a relationship with the lawyer, you have a relationship with the other people who are involved in the transaction. And now, even if your entire relationship is as simple as dropping them a New Year's card every year, and that's all you got, you have a name and an address, that you're still the only real estate professional they know, and you're the only one they know knows this property. And so when it's time to do something, you're the only one they know to call. As they go rummaging through, trying to find like, oh, what did I do with that New Year's card? And they'll find your number.
Go ahead, April.
I do have a question now. First, I wanted to say thank you, Scott, for sharing the suggestions on how to approach the attorneys, because I've always found it awkward when I know an attorney is saying something incorrect and they're stating it as if it's factual. It's always challenging trying to bring correction while respecting the attorney without letting the client know that that's what you're doing. So thank you so much for that. But my question is, during the presentation, you alluded to a deeper program for those individuals who like to take this a step beyond just downloading the PDF document. Can you speak into the program that you offer?
Okay, the program that I offer is called the Standout Pro, and it deals specifically with this material. So it goes into some of the basics of all the things you need to do to be a competent agent, and figuring that whatever organization you're in, certainly EXP is one of them, has excellent training on all of the fundamentals. And then it includes the entire estate training program for the families, because I teach a whole bunch of things that aren't the estate lawyer's job. Because when someone comes to me and says, can you draft a will or a trust? I'll ask them what they want me to do, what they own and where it's going, and I'll put together the documents for them. I don't know anything about the relationships with these people. I don't know who knows what. I don't know who has what expertise. That most of the time, if you're doing a $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 estate plan, client says, I want this, and you give them documents that do this, they said they want it. The breakdowns don't usually happen with the paperwork. The only paperwork breakdown I see is I have a signature thing I do. This is how I tell people whether or not you know you need my program. If your will wills to your trust everything that is already in your trust, chances are you had a level of lawyer that does things the way I would do things. I found this to be pretty consistent. If your will does not assume that everything that's already in the trust could accidentally end up in the will, then you need to look at the stuff, because that's one of the biggest problems. Stuff ends up in the wrong place. And that's the one thing in this the lawyer can fix. But when it comes into the deeper program, because it's teaching the families what they need, it's teaching us what the families need. And so then it's part of the dynamic to simplify it as the problem we're solving. If Mary was going to leave the property to her kids, and her kids don't know anything about how to run the strip mall. They don't know what their responsibilities are. They don't know what it takes to manage it. They don't know what they have to do and what they're not allowed to do. They don't know that. Part of the I Love Them Enough program dives into all of the things you need to make sure the people know and the relationships you will have with them. Now, in particular, imagine this situation. What say one of the say the boy is a drug addict. And the reason he has never OD'd, and this is what actually happened to a client, is that the daughter was an addict. She had never OD'd because she could never get that much. Suddenly she inherits $20,000. And she doesn't last 2 weeks. Because now she can buy all the drugs she wants. And even if you're smart enough to know what you can and can't handle, by the time you're however many doses into something, your judgment is impaired. And she literally got killed by her inheritance. And so these are some of the dynamics talked about in the program about knowing the people. And we talk about what the documents are. And I use an acronym like WTF MAD. And what WTF MAD stands for is will, trust, financial power of attorney, medical power of attorney, and directive. Now, a directive is also called an advanced medical directive. The stupidest name, and I'm frustrated with this, it's called a living will. So do you know what the difference is between a trust and a living trust? Basically nothing. Do you know what the difference is between a will and a living will? Everything. The vocabulary shift is almost identical. The document shift is completely different. I hate that. So I always call it a directive. And I abbreviate that for my clients as WTF MAD. WTF M lowercase a D. So that they know what your 5 documents are. And then check these 5 documents. And so it goes into all of that. And then the overlooked obvious part of the book correlates to the family business supplement so that we can learn as the real estate professionals all of the things that the family needs to know and that the owner of the property needs to know. Because say, for instance, in Mary's case, if she's managing the property and it landed in her will, and say now it has to go through probate before her kids get it, so it'll be 6 months. So who's the executor? Does the executor know how to run the property before the kids get it? Even if the kids know how to run the property? Does anyone know where the keys are? Even simple things like that. Like, I've got to go to the office. How do I get in? What do I have to do first? Where's the paper? Where's the ink? Is anyone authorized to get into the checking account? Does anyone even know what bank the checking account is at? So all of that level of detail is in the totality of the program. The stuff that only the real estate agents need to know, the stuff that the agents know what the families need to know, which then means you can be having those conversations because now you know what they need to know. And then all the things that on the business side need to be in place for a simpler thing as the survival of the business long enough to sell. Because I mean, poor Ken with all of those hotels, it doesn't matter if you get the listing if the hotels all die and now you're just selling real estate because you no longer have a going concern on it because no one even knew where the checking account was. And so that level of detail and all its complexity is in that program. And the total package for the real estate, the family, and the business side, I think is $2,500 or thereabouts. And it's recorded. It's in fairly small snippets. And if you want to be able to talk to me about it, feel free to chat. And it begins with the free download and the book. And if you want to dive into that level of mastery because you recognize, yes, this is a big issue. This can help me make money, taking better care of my clients. I want to know how to take care of my clients at this level. Then that level of training is available.
Thank you.
That's a lot, but I think it's important. Scott, I think for the group too, let's try to put a page together for this. And for those that want to really learn this, I think it's just really important because like I said, I think many of us, we've gone through this and to organizing, building a team, it just works, right? Working with their advisors. And when things happen, it's not so much they can prepare, to be honest. A lot of times when I got involved, it was a scramble, but some of them, as they knew they were getting older, usually around 70, unfortunately, right? Which is kind of late. They put it together, but you really should start it now for the younger to save on taxes and other things, right? And I know this is on estate planning, but there are tax savings for structures, and we will go through that because it is great to start from the beginning. It's not what you make, it's what you keep, all the way to setting it up so you can transfer it, stay in the game, and build the connections with all the advisors to get the business. So hopefully we can teach people. And I see Katie, a CPA here. Everyone has to work with the CPAs running their numbers, especially with taxes, valuations, and other parts. So very exciting. Scott, if you don't mind sharing, or if there's no more questions. Thank you, Scott. And looking forward to kind of building on this, because as everyone sees, we want to build to help everyone in 2025 to create their business, to help everyone build financial security and really get some more free time, their time, so they can spend with family, kids, or passion projects that people want to help other people. So again, Scott, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us on Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. We look forward to seeing everyone else again. And yes, bring your questions. These are all good stuff because there's no dumb questions. We want to make sure that everyone listens and learns from everyone else. Everyone have a great weekend or great week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
So long.
Bye, everyone, and aloha.